Good morning, everybody. How are we all doing today? It's another wonderful Sunday morning as we get ready to do this podcast. So let's get the plugging and chugging out of the way, shall we? I stream daily, including doing this podcast once a week on Twitch at twitch.tv/DJ_funky_fresh. Everything I do on Twitch ends up on YouTube at youtube.com/DJFunkyFreshGaming. And of course, the podcast gets posted on Spotify and SoundCloud. Just search for DJ Funky Fresh or Funky Bunch at Sunday Brunch. You also can find links to everything in the description for YouTube as well as SoundCloud. I don't know if that description transfers over to Spotify, but it's there on SoundCloud and everything. But yeah, now that we got that out of the way, it's time for us to jump back into our discussion on psychology. As you remember, we were going through the different types of psychology, but we'll give you a quick refresher overview of what psychology is in case, you forgot. Unless, of course, you're just binging all of my podcasts at one time. But what is psychology? Psychology is the study of mind and behavior. Encompasses the biological influences, social pressures, and environmental factors that affect how people think, act, and feel. It's a look into how stimuli affect a person as themselves. It's internal, that type of thing. So, I guess we'll just jump right back into it. Now, let's keep giving a little brief overview. Let's see. We also went over the different major schools of thought for psychology, with structuralism, functionalism, psychoanalysis, behaviorism, humanistic psychology, and cognitive psychology. Those are the major schools of thought for psych. But yeah. And then we were going through different types. And we're currently on developmental. So that's big and exciting, isn't it? Okay, so I guess we'll start with where we left off. Developmental. So, what is developmental psychology? So, developmental psychology is the branch of psychology that focuses on how people grow and change over the course of a lifetime. Those who specialize in this field are not just concerned with physical changes that occur as people grow. They also look at the social, emotional, and cognitive development that occurs throughout life. Yes, emotive, it's quite the development in our discussion. Some of the many issues that developmental psychologists may help patients deal with include motor skill development, language acquisition, emotional development, the emergence of self-awareness and self-concept, cognitive development during childhood and throughout life, social and cultural influences on child development, personality development, moral reasoning, and developmental challenges and learning disabilities. These professionals spend a great deal of time investigating and observing how these processes occur under normal circumstances, but they are also interested in learning about things that can disrupt developmental processes. The hope is, by better understanding how and why people change and grow, developmental psychologists can help people live up to their full potential. Understanding the course of normal human development and recognizing potential problems early on is important because untreated developmental problems may lead to difficulties with depression, low self-esteem, frustration, and low achievement in school. When I was in school, when I took developmental psychology, a lot of it focused on early childhood. It was more looking at, how the environment that children are grown up in, exposed to, understanding what what's going on with a child, if there's abnormalities with their development, with their growth, with the way they're thinking, how to fix that in the best way possible so that they're progressing along the normal track in order to be able to achieve their full potential. This one's really focused in on that idea of trying to fix as soon as possible in order to allow just a normal life type of deal, achieve all that you can achieve, that type of deal. So, concerns at different stages of development. As you might imagine, developmental psychologists often break down development according to various phases of life. Each of these phases of development represents a time when different milestones are typically achieved. People may face particular challenges at each point, and developmental psychologists can often help people who might be struggling with problems to get back on track. So, the first stage is the prenatal stage. So the prenatal period is of interest to developmental psychologists who seek to understand how the earliest influences on development can impact later growth during childhood. Psychologists may look at how primary reflexes emerge before birth, how fetuses respond to stimuli in the womb, and the sensations and perceptions that fetuses are capable of detecting prior to birth. Developmental psychologists may also look at potential problems such as Down syndrome, maternal drug use, and inherited diseases that might have an impact in the course of future development. Next period is early childhood, which is the period from infancy through to early childhood, is a time of remarkable growth and change. Developmental psychologists look at things such as physical, cognitive, and emotional growth that takes place during this critical period of development. In addition to providing interventions for potential developmental problems at this point, psychologists are also focused on helping kids achieve their full potential. Parents and health care experts are often on the lookout to ensure that kids are growing properly, receiving adequate nutrition, and achieving cognitive milestones appropriate for their age. Middle childhood. This period of development is marked by both physical maturation and the increased importance of social influences as children make their way through elementary school. Once again, this is to help deal with potential problems that might arise, such as social, emotional, and mental health issues. Then there's the adolescent teenage years. This is a subject of considerable interest as children experience the psychological turmoil and transition that often accompanies this period of development. Psychologists are especially interested in looking at how navigating this period leads to identity formation. At this age, kids often test limits and explore new identities as they explore the question of who they are and who they want to be. Developmental psychologists can help support teens as they deal with some of the challenging issues unique to the adolescent period, including puberty, emotional turmoil, and social pressure. And then, of course, there's early adulthood. This is often marked by forming and maintaining relationships, forming bonds, intimacy, close friendships, and starting a family. These are often the critical milestones during early adulthood. Those who can build and sustain such relationships tend to experience connectedness and social support, while those who struggle with such relationships may be left feeling alienated and lonely. People facing such issues may seek the assistance of a developmental psychologist in order to build healthier relationships and combat emotional difficulties. Then there's the middle adulthood. They tend to center on developing a sense of purpose and contribution to society. So those who engage in the world, contribute things that will outlast them, and leave a mark on the next generation emerge with a sense of purpose. Activities such as careers, families, group memberships, and community involvement are all things that can contribute to this feeling of generativity. And then finally, there's old age. Senior years are often viewed as a period of poor health, yet many older adults are capable of remaining active and busy well into their 80s and 90s. My grandpa is 80 or 90 years old, and he's more active than I am. He walks miles and miles and miles a day. He's easily 10 to 20 miles a day. He'll also just up and leave and go hiking through the mountains. That's my grandpa. Increased health concerns mark this period of development, and some individuals may experience mental declines related to dementia. This is a time of reflection back on life. Those who are able to look back and say, "Oh, life well lived," emerge with a sense of wisdom and readiness to face the end of their lives, while those who look back with regret may be left with feelings of bitterness and despair. Developmental psychologists may work with elderly patients to help them cope with issues related to the aging process. So, that's kind of what developmental psychologists do. They work with people of all ages in order to help them, navigate the difficulties of life, to just get that sense of, I did it. Just get through things. A lot of them focus on, children. A lot of them focus on adults, and the others focus on, old people. It's a field where you can be almost anywhere, but a lot of them focus in really on that beginning stages, because you can trace a lot of issues all the way back down to childhood. So, yeah. Next is educational psychology and the learning process. Educational psychology involves the study of how people learn, including topics such as student outcomes, the instructional process, individual differences in learning, gifted learning, and learning disabilities. Psychologists who work in this field are interested in how people learn and retain new information. This branch of psychology involves not just the learning process of early childhood and adolescence, but includes the social, emotional, and cognitive processes that are involved in learning throughout the entire lifespan. The field of educational psychology incorporates a number of other disciplines, including developmental psychology, behavioral psychology, and cognitive psychology. So, in today's complex educational system, educational psychologists work with educators, administrators, teachers, and students to learn more about how to help people learn best. This often involves finding ways to identify students who may need extra help, developing programs aimed at helping students who are struggling, and even creating new learning methods. Some different topics that educational psychologists are interested in include educational technology, which is looking at how different types of technology can help students learn; instructional design, so designing learning materials; special education, helping students who may need specialized instruction; curriculum development, creating curriculums to help maximize learning; organizational learning, studying how people learn in organizational settings; and gifted learnings, helping students who are identified as gifted learners. So, there are four major perspectives within this area. So, researchers within educational psychologists tend to take on different perspectives when considering a problem. One aspect is the behavioral perspective. This perspective suggests that all behaviors are learned through conditioning. Psychologists who take this perspective rely firmly on the principles of operant conditioning to explain how learning happens. For example, teachers might give out tokens that can be exchanged for desirable items such as candy. Such as candy and toys to reward good behavior. While such methods can be useful in some cases, the behavioral approach has been criticized for failing to account for such things as attitude, cognitions, and intrinsic motivations for learning. The second perspective is the developmental perspective. This one focuses on how children acquire new skills and knowledge as they develop. Jean Piaget's famous stages of cognitive development are one example of an important developmental theory looking at how children grow intellectually. By understanding how children think at different stages of development, educational psychologists can better understand what children are capable of at each point of their growth. This can help educators create instructional methods and materials best aimed at certain age groups. The third one is the cognitive perspective. This has become more widespread in recent decades, mainly because it accounts for how things such as memories, beliefs, emotions, and motivations contribute to the learning process. Cognitive psychology focuses on understanding how people think, learn, remember, and process information. Educational psychologists who take a cognitive perspective are interested in understanding how kids become motivated to learn, how they remember the things that they learn, and how they solve problems, among other things. Finally, the last approach is the constructivist approach. This is one of the most recent learning theories that focus on how children actively construct their knowledge of the world. Constructivism tends to account more for the social and cultural influences that impact how children learn. So, this perspective is heavily influenced by the work of psychologist Lev Vygotsky, who proposed ideas such as the zone of proximal development and instructional scaffolding. So, while educational psychology is a relatively young discipline, it will continue to grow as people become more interested in understanding how people learn. So yeah, educational psychologists, those are more, that is definitely less focused on, helping somebody with an issue, and more with how to structure things in society in order to help more people, especially mostly children, learn, how many people when they were going through school had, you could actually earn things to then exchange for special things on Fridays. I don't remember how you got the tickets or whatever, but I had that in 2nd grade, where we earned little things and then we could exchange them for fun erasers, a sticker on Fridays. I had that. And obviously, once I can definitely think of several different unique things. I don't remember exactly what they were, but I remember we would have a week or two of a unique different way of learning something new. That was just, experimental, it felt like, It's just we were just tried something different. In 5th grade, we were studying, I don't remember exactly what we were studying, but it became a game. It might have been hunter-gatherer type of thing, where we were studying early civilizations and things, and we all had our own tribe. And then we had to conduct activities and turn them in for grades, and based upon, how well we did on the assignments, depended on how well our tribe did. It was a way to get you invested, obviously, the person who, had the best tribe at the end, got a prize. We did something like that. At one point, we were studying Alaska in middle school for English. Yes, there was a book on the Iditarod. Does anybody know what the Iditarod is in Alaska? Shoot, I'm gonna have to actually look it up to make sure I get it right. Okay, cool. So, for those of you who don't know what the Iditarod is, it is the Iditarod Trail Sled Dog Race. It's an annual long-distance sled dog race run in early March from Anchorage, Alaska to Nome, Alaska, entirely within the U.S. state of Alaska. Mushers in a team of 14 dogs, of which at least 5 must be on the tow line at the finish line, cover a distance in 8 to 15 days. So it's basically a 2-week race through Alaska. But there was a book that we were reading about the Iditarod, and we started that at the same time as the Iditarod race. And we each got to choose a racer. And our job was to, give updates on how far our racer was. Ironically, the racer I chose was actually in first, but he stopped because somebody got injured, and he helped them finish. So he actually ended up finishing last. but he had stopped to help somebody finish. So yeah, that's not examples of necessarily educational psychologists, but that's the type of things that they're looking at, how to get you more invested. How are you going to retain a lesson? Like, I know the Iditarod very well because of that. Also might help because that was in middle school and it was with my favorite teacher, and that teacher also gave me lots of books. So I have a lot more memories of English because of that. But that's what educational psychologists do. They're just learning on how to make lessons stick for kids and how to help kids who are struggling. So, alright, next is experimental psychology. So, why do people do the things they do? What factors influence how personality develops? And how do our behaviors and experiences shape our character? These are just a few questions that psychologists explore, and experimental methods allow researchers to recreate and empirically test hypotheses. By studying such questions, researchers can develop theories that enable them to describe, explain, predict, and even change human behaviors. For example, researchers might utilize experimental methods to investigate why people engage in unhealthy behaviors. By learning more about the underlying reasons why these behaviors occur, researchers can then search for effective ways that people avoid such actions or replace unhealthy choices with more beneficial ones. So, reasons to study experimental psychology. While students are often required to take experimental psychology courses during undergraduate and graduate school, you should think about this as a subject as a methodology rather than a singular area within psychology. Many of the techniques are used by other subfields of psychology to conduct research on everything from childhood development to social issues. Experimental psychology is important because the findings discovered by psychologists play a vital role in our understanding of the human mind and behavior. By better understanding exactly what makes people tick, psychologists and other mental health professionals are able to explore new approaches to treating psychological distress and mental illness. So, what are the different methods that researchers use to investigate the human mind and behavior? Because the human mind is so complex, it seems like a challenging task to explore the many factors that contribute to how we think, act, and feel. Experimental psychologists use a variety of different research methods and tools to investigate human behavior. First one is experiments. In some cases, psychologists can perform experiments to determine if there is a cause and effect relationship between different variables. The basis of conducting a psychological experiment involve randomly assigning participants to groups, operationally defining variables, developing a hypothesis, manipulating the independent variables, and measuring the dependent variables. For example, researchers could perform a study to look at whether sleep deprivation impairs performance on a driving test. The experimenter could control for other variables that might influence the outcome, but then vary the amount of sleep that participants get the night before a driving test. All the participants would then take the same driving test via a simulator on a controlled course. By analyzing the results, researchers can then determine if it was a change in the independent variable, which is the amount of sleep, that led to differences in the dependent variable, which is the performance on the driving test. Experimentation remains the primary standard, but other techniques such as case studies, correlation research, and naturalistic observation are frequently utilized in psychological research. Another example of experimentation would be here's another famous case. It is the study on how people react to authority. In this one, the participants were told that they would be randomly sorted into two different things: the teacher and the learner. So, what the learner did was they sat in a chair and they were given a list of words from the teacher. The teacher would then list off those words, and the learner's job was to recite them back in the exact order that they were told. The teacher's job was to sit. So they were in different rooms communicating via an intercom. The teacher's job, obviously, like I told you, was to list off a series of words on a piece of paper that they had. And if the learner got it wrong, the teacher would push a button, giving them an electric shock. And as time progressed and they kept getting things wrong, the amount of electricity that they were supposed to use would go up. The only other individual would be the actual researcher, who would be sitting next to the teacher, documenting things. So what the participants didn't know was that the learners were not participants. They were actors paid to act a certain way. So every time they pushed the button to deliver an electric shock, it did not do anything. It was a dummy button. It was just the actor acting. But the real experiment was how a position of authority can influence people to do things they otherwise wouldn't. So what really happens is that the person's supposed to get things wrong, and the teacher's supposed to start delivering higher and higher amounts of shock. The learner's real job is to try to get the teacher to stop the experiment by saying anything of, I have a heart problem, my heart's starting to stop, I'm in so much pain, I can't do this anymore. Eventually to the point of they just stop responding because they're supposed to be quote-unquote unconscious. And the whole time, the teachers are all like looking at the researcher being like, what do I do? We should stop. This person's obviously in pain. But the researcher's supposed to, constantly be like, no. Keep going. The test must go on. They know what they were getting themselves into. Sad to say that very few, if any, people stopped the experiment. The presence of the researcher, the person in charge, was enough to overcome the teacher's personal beliefs and fears for the person's life. Like, there was literally something labeled as deadly shock, and people were zapping them in it with, no problems towards the end. That's something you will learn in psychology. That's a very famous test. No people were harmed, but it was just a look at, I think it was looking at why people in Nazi Germany were doing what they did. Because a lot of the Nazis weren't bad people. But like I said, a lot of people who were, Nazis, they weren't actually bad people. They didn't like hurting people. But they were given the orders to do it from higher ups. It's just a look at human conditioning, and, people aren't supposed to... You're born not... you're raised not to question people above you, If your teacher tells you to do something, you don't question them why. If your boss tells you to do something, you're not supposed to question them why. If your parents tell you to do something, you're not supposed to question them why. You're supposed to do it, do it, do it. So it's just a look at that, So, alright, the other way that experimental psychologists study things is a case study. Case studies allow researchers to study one single individual or group of people in great depth. When performing a case study, the researcher collects every single piece of data possible about the subject, often observing the person of interest over a period and in a variety of situations. Detailed information about the individual's background, including family history, education, work, and social life, are also collected. Such studies are often performed in instances where experimentation is not possible. For example, a scientist might conduct a case study when a person of interest has a unique or rare experience that could not be replicated in a lab. So a case study, you're expecting to study like the same person or groups of people over 20 years. I'm following a couple of case studies about potential solutions for my knees. It's something that, you're not going to get results for like 5-10 years. It's something that, the scientists are constantly going back and looking at. That's just a small example. Some case studies will watch the development of certain children in certain situations, like children born from parents who were heavy crackheads, for example, would be a case study. It would be they would be observing the children as they're growing up, noting any deficiencies and things. That type of deal. The next way that they study things is correlation research. Correlational studies makes it possible for researchers to look at relationships between different variables. For example, a psychologist might note that as one variable increases, another tends to decrease. While such studies can look at relationships, they cannot be used to imply causal relationships. Correlation does not equal causation. That's the golden rule for psychology and math. And then finally, they use naturalistic observation. Naturalistic observation gives researchers the opportunity to observe people in their natural environments. This technique can be particularly useful in cases where the investigators believe that a lab setting might have an undue influence on participant behaviors. So what do experimental psychologists do? They work in a wide variety of settings, including colleges, universities, research centers, government, and private businesses. Some of the professionals may focus on teaching experimental methods to students, while others conduct research on cognitive processes, animal behavior, neuroscience, personality, and many other subject areas. Those who work in academic settings often teach psychology courses, in addition to performing research and publishing their findings in professional journals. Other experimental psychologists work with businesses to discover ways to make employees more productive or to create a safer workplace, a specialty known as human factor psychology. So, experimental psychologists go almost anywhere, can do almost anything, because their job is to literally take any field of psychology and perform experiments on figuring out solutions to old problems, solutions to new problems, new ways to do things, to head off potential problems. It's very open. So, next up is forensic psychologists. What do forensic psychologists do? Forensic psychology is a field that combines the practice of psychology and the law. I studied forensic psychology. Those who work in this field utilize psychological expertise as it applies to the justice system. The word forensic originates from the Latin word forensics, which means the forum, or the court system of ancient Rome. The American Board of Forensic Psychology describes this field as the application of psychology to issues that involve the law and legal system. Interest in forensic psychology has grown significantly in recent years. Increasing numbers of graduate programs offer dual degrees in psychology and law, while others provide specialization in forensic psychology. I had a dual degree in psychology and sociology pre-law, which I studied, police and society. I studied criminology, whatever. Some psychologists hold a specialist degree in forensic psychology, but most are licensed psychologists who hold either a PhD or a PsyD. These professionals may work in both criminal and civil law areas. So, what do forensic psychologists do? If you enjoy learning about the science of human behavior and the law, then forensic psychology will probably interest you quite a bit. The field has witnessed dramatic growth in recent years as more and more students become interested in this applied branch of psychology. However, forensic psychology is about much more than the glamorized views portrayed by television shows, movies, and books. Some of the functions typically performed within forensic psychology involve competency evaluations. That is the evaluation given to individuals who are pleading the insanity plea, making sure they are competent to stand trial and fully understand their actions, either at the time that they committed a crime or at the current time. They also do sentencing recommendations, evaluations for the risk of reoffending, testimony as an expert witness, child custody evaluations, academic research on criminality, consulting with law enforcement, treatment of criminal offenders, provide psychological services to inmates and offenders, trial consultants who help with jury selection, witness preparation, and legal strategies, or design correctional programs. Forensic psychology is defined as the intersection of psychology and law, but forensic psychologists can perform many roles, so this definition can vary. In many cases, people working in forensic psychology are not necessarily forensic psychologists. These individuals might be clinical psychologists, school psychologists, neurologists, or counselors who lend their psychological expertise to provide testimony, analysis, or recommendations in legal or criminal cases. For example, a clinical psychologist might provide mental health services such as assessment, diagnosis, and treatment to individuals who might have come in contact with the criminal justice system. Clinicians might be asked to determine if a suspected criminal has a mental illness, or if they may be asked to provide treatment to individuals who have substance abuse and addiction issues. Another example is that of a school psychologist. While people in this profession typically work with children in school settings, a school psychologist working in a forensic psychology might evaluate children in suspected abuse cases, help prepare children to give testimony in court, or offer testimony in child custody disputes. Exactly, Panda. It's dun. So, what distinguishes forensic psychology? What makes forensic psychology different from another specialty areas such as clinical psychology? Typically, the duties of forensic psychologists are fairly limited in terms of scope and duration. Forensic psychologists asked to perform a very specific duty in each individual case, such as determining if a suspect is mentally competent to face charges. Unlike the typical clinical setting where a client has voluntarily sought out assistance or evaluation, a forensic psychologist usually deals with clients who are not there of their own free will. This can make assessment, diagnosis, and treatment much more difficult since some clients willfully resist attempts at helping. Or at help. What kind of education and training is required? Forensic psychology is not a common degree option, yet more and more schools are offering it as a specialty. If you are interested in becoming a forensic psychologist, you should take courses that focus on topics such as criminal psychology, social behavior, abnormal behavior, cognitive psychology, perception, drugs and psychopharmacology, law, and criminal justice. I would also recommend criminology as well as police and society. But that might have been a unique Ohio University course. If your school does offer coursework or a degree option in forensic psychology, you can expect to tackle topics that include deviant behavior, the psychology of criminal behavior, criminal risk assessment, domestic violence, mental health, school social policy, juvenile criminal justice, and adult offender treatment. Growing popularity of the field has also led to an increase in the number of master's level forensic psychology degrees. Many experts suggest that such programs, while popular and appealing, have a disadvantage over clinical doctoral level training. Doctoral level study in forensic psychology typically focus on topics including research methods, personality analysis, cognitive science, psychology and the law, ethical and legal issues, assessment, and treatment. Oh yeah, that's your forensic psychology. Ugh. Sorry, I need this coffee. Next is health psychology and illness. Health psychology is a specialty area that focuses on how biology, psychology, behavior, and social factors influence health and illness. Other terms include mental psychology and behavioral medicine are sometimes used interchangeably with the term health psychology. Health and illness are influenced by a wide variety of factors, while contagious and hereditary illness are common. Many behavioral and psychological factors can impact overall physical well-being and various medical conditions. So, a quick overview of health psychology. The field of health psychology is focused on promoting health as well as the prevention and treatment of disease and illness. Health psychologists also focus on understanding how people react to, cope with, and recover from illness. And some health psychologists work to improve the healthcare system and the government's approach to healthcare policy. Division 38 of the APA, the American Psychological Association, is devoted to health psychology. According to the division, their focus is on a better understanding of health and illness, studying the psychological factors that impact health, and contributing to healthcare systems and healthcare policy. The field of health psychology is still young, emerging during the 1970s to address the rapidly changing field of healthcare. Life expectancy was much. Okay, this is written weird. Life expectancy was much lower. No, that doesn't make sense. The sentence is, life expectancy was much low things as basic sanitation and avoidance of infectious disease. Whatever. Today's life expectancy in the U.S. is around 80 years, and the leading cause of mortality are chronic diseases such as heart disease and stroke, often is linked to your lifestyle. Health psychology has emerged to help address these changes and health. So how does health psychology differ? Because health psychology emphasizes how behavior influences health, it is uniquely positioned to help people change the behaviors that contribute to health and well-being. For example, psychologists who work in this field might conduct applied research on how to prevent unhealthy behaviors such as smoking and look for new ways to encourage healthy actions such as exercising. For example, while most people are realizing that eating a diet high in sugar is not good for their health, many people continue to engage in such behaviors regardless of the possible short-term and long-term consequences. Health psychologists look at the psychological factors that influence these health choices and explore ways to motivate people to make better health choices. So, what are current issues in health psychology? Health psychologists engage in a wide variety of activities. These are only a few of the current issues in health psychology. Stress reduction, weight management, smoking cessation, improving daily nutrition, reducing risky sexual behaviors, hospice care and grief counseling for terminal patients, preventing illness, understanding the effects of illness, improving recovery, and teaching coping skills. Yeah. That's basically health psychology in a nutshell. I didn't do anything with health psychology, so I have not much to say about it. But, it definitely sounds like an interesting field. So, next up is industrial organizational psychology. This is the field that I was very highly considering going into when I started psychology. So, industrial organizational psychology, often known as I.O. psychology, is the branch of psychology that applies psychological theories and principles to organizations. This field focuses on increasing workplace productivity and related issues such as physical and mental well-being of employees. I.O. psychologists perform a wide variety of tasks, including studying worker attitudes and behavior, evaluating companies, and conducting leadership training. The overall goal of this field is to study and understand human behavior in the workplace. I can say off the record that I.O. psychologists tend to make the most amount of money. That is all. What is I.O. psychology? You can think of I.O. psychology as having two major sides. First, there's the industrial side, which involves looking at how to best match individuals to specific job roles. This segment of I.O. psychology is sometimes referred to as the personnel psychology. People who work in this area might assess employee characteristics and then match these individuals to jobs in which they are likely to perform well. Other functions that fall on the industrial side of IO psychology include training employees, developing job performance standards, and measuring job performance. The organizational side of psychology is more focused on understanding how organizations affect individual behavior. Organizational structure, social norms, management styles, and role expectations are all factors that can influence how people behave within an organization. By understanding such factors, IO psychologists hope to improve individual performance and health while at the same time benefiting the organization as a whole. While IO psychology is an applied field, basic theoretical research is also essential. With roots in experimental psychology, IO psychology has a number of different sub-areas such as human-computer interaction, personnel psychology, and human factors. So there are 6 key subject areas. According to Munchinsky's book, Psychology Applied to Work, An Introduction to IO Psychology, most industrial organizational psychologists work in one of 6 major subject areas: employee selection, ergonomics, organizational development, performance management, training and development, and work life. Employee selection, this area involves developing employee selection assessments, such as screening tests to determine if job applicants are qualified for a particular position. Ergonomics, the field of ergonomics involves designing procedures and equipment designed to maximize performance and minimize injury. For organizational development, IO psychologists who work in this area help improve organizations, often through increasing profits, redesigning products, and improving the organizational structure. For performance management, IO psychologists who work in this area develop assessments and techniques to determine if employees are doing the jobs well. For training and development, professionals in this area often determine what type of skills are necessary to perform specific jobs, as well as develop and evaluate employee training programs. And work life, this area focuses on improving employee satisfaction and maximizing the productivity of the workforce. IO psychologists in this area might work to find ways to make jobs more rewarding or design programs that improve the quality of life in the workplace. So, careers in IO psychology. Interest in IO psychology careers has grown. The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics predicted that IO psychology would be one of the fastest growing careers, and wages have been rising over 10% per year. According to employment statistics from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the mean annual wage for IO psychologists as of May 2016 was $109,030. The bottom 10% of IO psychologists earned around $51,000, and the top 10% earned an average of $184,380, with a median annual salary of $192,150. I'll just let those numbers sink in. The top 10% is making almost $200,000. But if you think about it, their entire job is to figure out how to make more profit, how to make employees work harder, how to make employees work more efficiently, so that companies are getting more bang for their buck. It makes sense that they're going to pay people for the best. As with other specialty areas, wages vary depending upon a variety of factors, including geographic location, educational background, the area of employment, and years of experience in the field. Individuals with a master's or a doctorate degree also command higher yearly salaries. In general, those in large urban areas will find more employment opportunities as well as higher wages, although such benefits are often accompanied by a higher cost of living. States employing the most IO psychologists include Virginia, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, Missouri, and New Jersey. Professionals working in Virginia earned an average of $126,000, while those employed in Massachusetts earned an average of $75,000. U.S. Department of Labor reports that wages have also varied considerably depending on the industry in which IO psychologists are employed. The mean annual wage for various industries is as follows. Colleges, universities, and professional schools, the average is $70,000. Management, scientific, and technical consulting services, $95,000. Scientific research and developmental services, $150,000. And state government is $66,600. So who should study IO psychology? Students who are interested in applying psychological principles to real-world settings should consider IO psychology. If you have a strong interest in psych, as well as related subjects such as product design, computer, statistics, and engineering, this may be the ideal field for you. So yeah, that was the field I was the most interested in before I said, screw it, I'm going to do law. And then I said, screw law, I'm going to do contracts. Anyway, next up is personality psychology. Your unique personality makes you who you are and influences everything from your relationships to the way you live. Personality is something that you might be able to describe, but do you know what the scientific study of personality entails? Personality psychology is one of the largest and most popular branches of psych. Professionals who study personality psychology want to understand how personality develops, as well as how it influences the way we think and behave. Psychologists look at how personality varies among individuals, as well as how people are similar. They also assess, diagnose, and treat personality disorders. What exactly is personality? How can understanding your personality help you gain insight into your emotional well-being? So, what is it that makes you who you are? Many factors contribute to the person you are today, including genetics, your upbringing, and your life experiences. Many would argue what makes you unique is the characteristic pattern of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that make up your personality. While there is no single agreed-upon definition of personality, it is often thought of as something that arises from within the individual and remains fairly consistent throughout life. Personality encompasses all of the thought, behavior patterns, and social attitudes that impact how we view ourselves and what we believe about others in the world around us. Understanding personality allows psychologists to predict how people will respond to certain situations and the sort of things they prefer and value. To get a sense of how researchers study personality psychology, it will be helpful to learn more about some of the most influential personality theories. So there's a number of different theories. There's the trait theories of personality. This centers on the idea that personality is comprised of broad traits or dispositions. Various theories have been proposed to identify which attributes are key components in personality, as well as attempts to determine the number of personality traits. Common traits are shared by many people within a particular culture. Central traits are those that make up an individual's personality. Cardinal traits are those that are so dominant that a person becomes primarily known for those characteristics. An example of a cardinal trait is Mother Teresa. She was so well known for her charitable work that her name became almost synonymous with providing services to those in need. It is suggested that there are as many as 4,000 individual traits. A different psychologist proposed that there were only 16. They also believe that these traits exist on a continuum and that all people possess each trait in various degrees. Today, the Big Five theory is perhaps the most popular and widely accepted trait theory of personality. The theory proposes that personality is made up of 5 broad personality dimensions: agreeableness, conscientiousness, extroversion, neuroticism, and openness. The Big Five theory states that each trait exists on a broad continuum. An individual's personality will fall somewhere on the spectrum for each trait. For example, you might be high in extroversion, conscientiousness, and agreeableness, but somewhere in the middle of openness and neuroticism. So how is personality tested? To study and measure personality, psychologists have developed personality tests, assessment, and inventories. The tests are widely used in a variety of settings. For example, the famous Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, the MBTI, is frequently used as a pre-employment screening assessment. Other assessments can be used to help people learn about different aspects of their personalities. Some tests are used as screening and evaluation tools to help diagnose personality disorders. Getting a better understanding of your personality can be helpful in many aspects of your life. For example, relationships with friends, family, and coworkers might improve when you become aware that you work well with others or that you need to take time to be alone. You've probably encountered a selection of personality tests online, for example, an online quiz that tells you whether you are extroverted or introverted, even though you should probably know if you're extroverted or introverted. Some of the tests purport to reveal the, quotes, real you, while others are clearly meant only for entertainment. personality assessments that you take online should be taken with a grain of salt. Informal tools can be fun and might offer some insight into your preferences and characteristics, but only personality tests administered by trained and qualified professionals should be used as a formal assessment or to make a diagnosis. Personality disorders. Personality psychologists are also interested in studying problems with personality that may arise. Personality disorders are characterized as chronic and pervasive mental disorders that can seriously impact a person's thoughts, behavior, and interpersonal functioning. The current edition of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, or the DSM-5, lists 10 personality disorders, including antisocial personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, and obsessive-compulsive personality disorder. The National Institute of Mental Health reports that approximately 9.1% of the adult population of the United States experience symptoms of at least one personality disorder each year. Being diagnosed with a personality disorder can be distressing, but you should know that there are treatments. Working with a mental health professional, you can learn to recognize the difficulties that these disorders can cause and explore new coping strategies. It is okay to feel frightened and concerned about what the future might hold, but remember that you do not have to face it alone. There are people who are trained, skilled, and ready to help you take the next steps in your treatment. Yes, that is a lot of people emotive. Chances are, if you have 10 friends, at least one of them has a personality disorder. And if you can't figure out who it is among those 10 friends, it's probably you. That is a joke. Psychology careers in schools. A school psychologist is a type of psychologist that works within the educational system to help children with emotional, social, and academic issues. The goal of school psychology is to collaborate and listen with parents, teachers, and students to promote a healthy learning environment that focuses on the need of children. School psychology was established in 1969. So what do school psychologists do? School psychologists work with individual students and groups of students to deal with behavioral problems, academic difficulties, disabilities, and other issues. They also work with teachers and parents to develop techniques to deal with home and classroom behavior. Other tasks involve training students, parents, and teachers about how to manage crisis situations and substance abuse problems. According to the National Association of School Psychology, there are 10 domains in which school psychologists provide services, including database decision-making and accountability, consultation and collaboration, interventions and instructional support to develop academic skills, interventions in mental health services to develop social and life skills, school-wide practices to promote learning, preventative and responsive services, family-school collaboration services, diversity in development and learning, research and program evaluation, and legal, ethical, and professional practice. School psychologists also act as educators by helping others understand more about child development, behavioral problems, and behavior management techniques. Where are they employed? Well, most work in elementary and secondary schools. There are a number of different areas where school psychologists might find employment. Private clinics, hospitals, state agencies, and universities are possible sectors of employment. School psychologists also go into private practice and serve as consultants, especially those with a doctoral degree in school psychology. Earnings and outlooks. According to the Occupational Outlook Handbook, published by the U.S. Department of Labor, the median salary for a psychologist working in an elementary or secondary school is $72,910. The job outlook for school psychologists is that the field is expected to grow 14% from 2016 to 2026, which is faster than the average. So, U.S. News and World Report consistently names school psychology as one of the top 100 professions, and the field is expected to continue to grow. So, choosing a career as a school psychologist. You should look at the benefits and drawbacks involved with this career to help decide if it is the right choice. Some pros are being able to help students succeed, keeping a school day schedule since most school psychologists work in elementary and secondary school settings, and collaborating with a variety of community members including counselors, teachers, parents, and students. Some cons are difficulties with students or parents can lead to a high stress level. Work-related stress and frustration can lead to burnout, and school psychologists often face hectic schedules and an overload of clients. But that can be true for almost anything with psychology. So the type of degree needed for psychology in school, 2 or 3 years of graduate school is the minimum level of training required by most states. However, each state has different requirements for school psychologists. You will need certification or licensure in the state in which you wish to work. Before you choose school psychology graduate program, be sure to check the specific licensing requirement for your state. And look at that, everybody. We just flew through another hour of our podcast, and we are still not done. We've still got a couple more things in psychology. I want to wrap up psychology, and then I don't have a whole lot for sociology, but maybe I'll be able to find more to get us so much. There is a lot of info out there for psychology. Psychology is very, very important to everybody's, it's important to every job, and it's definitely something I would push for you to learn. You are required, I believe, for a majority of courses in college, you are required to have a social science credit. In my case, that was taking psychology and sociology, but I was already studying psychology and sociology. It's actually why I got a dual degree, but we'll go over that when I'm wrapping up psychology and sociology. So, yeah. We hit a bunch more. We still have social psychology to review and sports psychology. So, yeah, that is it for our podcast this week. I hope you all have been enjoying this train of thought for psychology. And we've got loads more to hit upon next week. So, yeah. Thank you, everybody, for dropping by. Thank you all for listening. I hope you all enjoyed. And until the next time, everybody, stay funky, people.